The steamer, delayed by a storm, dropped anchor only late in the evening in a small French harbor. The night train to Germany had already departed. I was left to spend an extra day in an unfamiliar place, and the evening promised nothing but the dreary music of a ladies' orchestra in some entertainment hall or a dull conversation with entirely accidental fellow travelers. The air in the hotel's modest restaurant struck me as unbearably smoky, thick with haze, especially after my lips still retained the salty chill, the breath of the sea. So I wandered out at random, along a wide, well-lit street toward the square where the Civic Guards band was playing, and from there, farther still, drifting among the slow-moving stream of strollers. At first, it was pleasant to sway aimlessly in the waves of an indifferent, provincially overdressed crowd. But soon the closeness of strangers began to weigh on me, their abrupt laughter, glances filled with surprise, detachment, or mockery, the subtle nudges that pushed me forward, the light pouring from 1,000 sources, and the endless shuffling of feet. After days at sea, my body still lived in motion. A sweet, intoxicating languor coursed through my blood. Beneath my feet, the ground seemed to sway, the earth breathed and lifted, and the street appeared to rise into the sky. My head spun, and to escape the noise, I turned into a side alley without checking its name, then into another, narrower one, where the chaotic murmur gradually faded. I began to wander aimlessly through a labyrinth of branching streets, like veins, growing darker the farther I moved from the main square. The great arc-shaped lanterns, moons of the central boulevards, did not shine here, and in the dim light I could finally see the stars again, and the black, clouded sky. I had evidently reached the harbor's edge, the sailors' quarter. It was clear from the sharp scent of fish, the sweet, decaying odor of seaweed, even when cast ashore, and the stale fumes that cling to such corners until a storm sweeps through and airs them out. I found comfort in the twilight and unexpected solitude. I slowed my pace, surveying one street after another. None resembled its neighbor. Some were peaceful, others riotous, but all were steeped in darkness, filled with muffled voices and music flowing mysteriously from beneath the arches, impossible to trace to any source. The houses were shut tight, only flickering with red or yellow glimmers. I love such streets in foreign cities, this grim marketplace of passions, a secret heap of temptations for sailors who, after lonely nights in dangerous seas, come ashore for a single night to fulfill, in an hour, their long, aching dreams. These narrow alleys must hide somewhere in the lower depths of the great city, for they brazenly and persistently speak of what lies behind 100 masks, behind mirrored windows and respectable inhabitants. Music beckons from cramped halls, cinemas shout with garish posters promising unheard-of splendor, four-sided lanterns tucked under archways wink invitingly and unmistakably, and through half-open doors, a naked body glimmers beneath gilded tinsel. From taverns come drunken voices and the shouts of quarreling gamblers. Sailors grin as they pass one another, their eyes burning with anticipation. Here there is everything: wine and women, spectacle and thrill, the basest and the loftiest adventures. Yet all of it, timid and still treacherously obvious, lurks behind hypocritically lowered shutters, hidden from view, and this seeming enclosure excites with a double allure: secrecy and accessibility. These streets are the same in Hamburg, Colombo, Havana. They resemble one another just as the grand avenues of great cities do, for the heights and depths of life everywhere wear the same face. They are the last strange remnants of a chaotically sensual world, where instincts still act raw and unrestrained, dark jungles of desire, teeming with lustful beasts. Such are these forsaken streets, stirring with what seems to be, and alluring with what remains unseen. One can dream of them. So it was with this street, in whose captivity I suddenly found myself. On a whim, I followed two cuirassiers whose sabers clinked against the uneven cobblestones. From one tavern, some women called out to them, they laughed, replied with coarse jokes, one of them knocked on a window, a burst of shouting followed from somewhere inside, and they moved on. Their laughter grew fainter and finally died away. The street sank once more into silence, with only a few windows dimly glimmering in the pale moonlight. I stood still, breathing in that silence so dense it felt almost tangible, as though something secret, impure, and unsettling lay hidden behind it. It was unmistakable. This silence was a deception, and in its misty haze smoldered something of the world's rot. Yet I did not move, listening to the void. I no longer felt the city, nor the street itself, nor its name, nor even my own. I knew only this: I was a stranger here, dissolved into the unknown, without purpose, without task, without connection to this shadowed life, and yet I sensed it as fully as the blood in my veins. One feeling possessed me: nothing here was happening for my sake, and yet everything belonged to me. It was that blessed sensation of deepest, truest experience, born from inner detachment, and nourishing my being like living water with every brush against the unknown. And then, in that moment, as I stood alert, listening in the deserted street, as though awaiting something that must happen, something that would draw me out of this trance-like estrangement, a German song reached my ears. It came muffled, perhaps from behind a wall, perhaps from far away. A woman's voice sang a simple melody from Der Frühschütz, lovely, virginal wreath. She sang poorly, but still it was a German song, here, in a forgotten corner of the world, and for that reason, it felt especially dear. The song came from somewhere unseen, but to me it was a greeting, the first, after a long separation, from my homeland. Who speaks my language here? I wondered, in this silent alley. Whose heart had summoned this modest tune, stirring memory? I followed the voice, along dark houses that seemed to slumber, their shutters closed, behind which lights flickered treacherously, and sometimes, a beckoning hand. Garish signs hung here and there, bright posters, and a tucked-away tavern promised whiskey, beer, ale, but everything was locked, inaccessible, and yet still luring passers-by. Now and then, footsteps echoed in the distance, but the voice continued, growing louder with each refrain, drawing nearer. At last, I reached the house. After a moment's hesitation, I approached the inner door, tightly curtained with white drapes. And just then, something stirred in the darkness. A figure crouched by the glass recoiled in fright. I saw a face bathed in the red glow of a lantern, pale with terror. The man glanced at me in confusion, muttered something like an apology, and vanished into the half-light of the street. He struck me as strange. I watched him go, his silhouette still faintly visible in the gloom. And from inside, the singing grew louder, more insistent, more inviting. I opened the door and stepped in. The song broke off abruptly, as if severed by a knife, and I felt, with a jolt of fear, a void before me, a hostile silence, as though an invisible hand had shattered something fragile and vital. Only gradually did my eyes adjust to the dim interior of the nearly empty room. It contained nothing but a buffet counter and a solitary table. Clearly, this was merely an antechamber to other rooms, whose purpose was easily guessed from the subdued glow of lamps and the beds glimpsed through half-open doors. Leaning against the counter stood a heavily made-up woman with a weary face. Behind it, a stout, greyish, somewhat slovenly proprietress, and beside her a rather pretty young girl. My greeting fell into the space like a stone into water, and only after a pause came a sluggish reply. The strained, joyless silence made me uneasy, and though I would gladly have left, I found no excuse to do so, so I obediently sat down at the table. The woman at the counter, as if suddenly recalling her duties, asked what I would like. Her accent immediately revealed her as German. I ordered a beer. She left and soon returned with a glass, her indifference expressed even more clearly in her gait than in the dull eyes that flickered beneath heavy lids, like dying candles. Automatically, by the custom of such places, she placed a second glass beside mine for herself. When she clinked it against mine, her gaze drifted past me with lazy detachment, allowing me to study her freely. Her face still retained its symmetry, but had hardened, as if frozen by emotional exhaustion like a mask. Everything about it seemed slack: puffy eyelids, limp hair, bloated cheeks streaked with cheap rouge, sagging in folds toward her mouth. Her dress was thrown on carelessly, her voice hoarse from smoke and beer. Everything about her spoke of a person mortally tired, living by inertia, feeling nothing. A chill crept over me, and to break the silence, I asked her a question. She replied without looking at me, indifferently and dully, barely moving her lips. I felt like an intruder. The proprietress yawned. The girl in the corner glanced at me as if waiting to be summoned. I would have been glad to leave, but couldn't stir. I sat like a drunken sailor, chained to my chair by curiosity. In this stale, airless room reigned a disturbing, inexplicable indifference. Suddenly I flinched, a sharp burst of laughter erupted beside me. At that moment, the lamp flickered. From the draught, I realized the door behind me had been opened. "Back again," she shouted mockingly and harshly in German. "Still skulking around the house, you scoundrel? Well, come in then, I won't hurt you." I turned sharply, first to her, her voice slicing through the air like flame, then to the door. It hadn't yet fully opened, but I already recognized the staggering figure, the meek gaze of the same man who had stood earlier in the entryway, as if glued to the glass. He held his hat in his hand, trembling from her harsh words and the laughter that shook her heavy frame. The proprietress responded with a hurried whisper. "Sit over there, by Francoise," she ordered the poor man as he crept forward. "Can't you see I have a guest?" She barked this in German. The proprietress and the girl burst into laughter, though they seemed not to understand a word, but the visitor was clearly familiar to them. "Give him champagne, Francoise. Bring the expensive bottle," she shouted, laughing, then turned to him again. "If it's too pricey, stay outside, you miserable miser. I bet you'd love to stare at me for free. I know you want everything for nothing." The visitor's tall figure shrank under the weight of her harsh, rasping laughter. His back hunched, his face turned away as if trying to hide, and the hand that reached for the bottle trembled so violently that wine spilled across the table. He tried to lift his eyes to the woman, but his gaze remained glued to the floor, wandering helplessly over the tiled surface. Only now, in the lamplight, did I truly see his face, pale, gaunt, crumpled, with damp, stringy hair clinging to a bony skull, and wrists so limp and brittle they seemed broken. A pitiful body, drained of strength, yet not entirely devoid of some inner fury. Everything about him was twisted, displaced, crushed, and the glance he suddenly threw, only to snatch away in fear, flared with a flicker of bitter, troubled fire. "Pay him no mind," the woman said to me in French, gripping my elbow as if she meant to forcibly turn me toward her. "We've got old scores to settle, not from yesterday." Then she shouted at him again, baring her teeth like she meant to bite. Listen in, you old snake. Want to know what I'm saying? I'm saying I'd rather throw myself into the sea than go back to you." The proprietress and the other girl burst out laughing again, their grins dull and vacant. Clearly, this was routine amusement for them, a daily diversion. But I felt a chill when I saw Francoise sidle up to him and begin, with feigned tenderness, to tease him with caresses he recoiled from in horror, unable to reject outright. Each time his wandering gaze settled on me with submissive, servile humility, I felt a wave of dread. And the woman beside me, she seemed to awaken from a trance, her face suddenly contorted with such malice that her hands began to tremble. I threw money on the table and made to leave, but she didn't take it. "If he's bothering you, I'll throw him out like a dog. He has to obey. Come on, have another drink with me. Come here." She pressed herself against me in a sudden, passionate, but clearly theatrical gesture, meant only to torment him. She kept glancing in his direction, and it sickened me to see him flinch as if touched by red-hot iron. I ignored her, watching only him, and with growing unease, I saw something building inside him: rage, desire, envy, humiliation. And how he shrank again the moment she turned her head toward him. She clung to me more tightly, trembling with pleasure at her cruel game, and I was repulsed by her painted face, reeking of cheap powder, by the scent of her sagging body. To pull away, I reached for a cigar, and hadn't yet looked for matches when she barked at him with commanding scorn. "Give him a light." I was startled even more than he was by the vile demand, and hastily fumbled in my pocket for matches. But he, lashed by her words like a whip, was already approaching with his crooked, faltering gait, and quickly, as if afraid to touch the table, placed a lighter before me. For a moment our eyes met. In his I saw endless shame and a fierce, hardened despair. And that enslaved look struck something in me, the man, the brother. I felt the depth of his humiliation at her hands, and was ashamed with him. "Thank you very much," I said in German. She flinched. "You shouldn't have troubled yourself." And I offered him my hand. A long hesitation, then I felt his damp, bony fingers, and suddenly a convulsive, grateful squeeze. For a second his eyes lit up as they met mine, then sank again beneath lowered lids. Out of spite toward the woman, I wanted to invite him to sit with us, and my hand must have already begun the gesture, because she quickly snapped. "Go back to your corner and don't bother us." At that, a wave of revulsion swept over me at her hoarse, biting voice, at this vile torment. What was I doing in this smoky den, with this repulsive prostitute, this pitiful man, this stench of beer, smoke, and cheap perfume? I needed air. I shoved the money toward her, stood up, and firmly freed myself from her grasp when she tried to hold me back. I refused to take part in this degradation, and my decisive rejection made it clear how little her charms appealed to me. Then rage flared in her. She opened her mouth, but didn't dare unleash her fury, and suddenly, in a burst of unfeigned hatred, turned toward him. He, sensing danger, hurriedly, as if driven by her threatening gaze, pulled a wallet from his pocket with trembling fingers. He was clearly afraid to be left alone with her, and in his haste couldn't untie the knot. It was a knitted, beaded purse, the kind peasants and working folk carry. It was obvious. He wasn't used to parting with money quickly, unlike sailors who pull out handfuls and toss them on the table. He knew the value of every coin, and before letting one go, he liked to hold it in his hand. How he trembles for his precious little money. "Not going well, is it?" "Just wait," she mocked, stepping forward. He recoiled, and seeing his fear, she shrugged and, with a look of indescribable disgust, hissed, "I won't take anything from you. I couldn't care less about your money. I know every coin accounted for, your glorious little savings, not a single extra penny ever slips through. But," she suddenly tapped his chest, "what if someone steals those bills you've got sewn in right here?" And indeed, like a heart patient clutching his chest in panic, he pressed a pale, trembling hand to his breast, feeling around for the hidden spot, and, somewhat reassured, let it fall. "Miser," she spat. But then his face flushed dark red, and with a sudden motion, he hurled his wallet at Francoise. She shrieked in surprise, then burst out laughing, and he bolted for the door as if fleeing a fire. For a moment, the woman stood tall, blazing with furious rage. Then her eyelids drooped, her shoulders slumped, and she seemed suddenly old, exhausted. A flicker of confusion passed through her eyes as they settled on me. Like a drunk awakening from a stupor with a vague sense of shame, she stood before me. Out on the street, he'll whimper, mourning his money, maybe even run to the police and claim we robbed him. And tomorrow he'll be back again. But I won't be his. Anyone but him. She walked to the counter, tossed a few coins onto it, and downed a shot of vodka in one gulp. The fire reignited in her eyes, but dimly now, as if through tears of rage and humiliation. My pity for her was overcome by revulsion. "Goodbye," I said. Only the proprietress replied. The woman didn't turn around, she just laughed, hoarsely and mockingly. Outside, the street was nothing but night and sky, a heavy haze veiled in endlessly distant moonlight. I inhaled the warm, yet bracing air with greedy lungs. Fear and disgust dissolved into a vast wonder at the sheer variety of human fate. And once again I felt that feeling that moves me to tears, that behind every window lies a story, every door opens into a drama. Life is everywhere, multifaceted, and even its filthiest corners teem with images, like gleaming dung beetles. All the vileness I had witnessed faded. The nervous tension gave way to a sweet languor, and I already felt the urge to transform what I'd lived into pleasant dreams. I glanced around instinctively, trying to find my way home through the tangled maze of alleys. And then, as if silently creeping up, a shadow rose before me. "Excuse me," came a voice I instantly recognized, humble, soft. "You seem to be lost. May I show you the way? Where are you staying?" I named my hotel. "I'll walk you there, if you'll allow me," he added, in a tone of quiet submission. A chill ran through me again. Those creeping, ghost-like steps, nearly silent, yet unrelenting in the darkness of the Port District, pushed aside the memory of what had happened, replacing it with a vague, disquieting confusion. I felt the meek expression in his eyes without seeing them, noticed the twitch of his lips. I knew he wanted to speak, but I neither encouraged nor stopped him, surrendering to a daze in which curiosity mingled with physical inertia. He coughed several times. I sensed his suppressed attempts to begin, but some cruelty, as if passed to me from that woman, took pleasure in his inner struggle between shame and the urge to speak. I didn't help him, letting silence hang over us like a black cloud. Our footsteps echoed out of sync, his shuffling, aged, mine deliberately loud and brisk, as if I were trying to escape this sordid world. The tension between us grew, the silence stretched like a taut string. And then, at last, he broke it with desperate timidity and spoke. "You were there. You were, sir, witness to a very strange scene. Forgive me for returning to it, but it must have seemed strange to you, and ridiculous. That woman, you see." He faltered. Something was caught in his throat. Then his voice dropped to a whisper, and he hurriedly blurted out. "That woman, she's my wife." I must have flinched in surprise, for he quickly added, as if to explain. "Well, she was my wife 5 years ago. In Hesse, in Heratzheim, that's where I'm from. I wouldn't want you, sir, to think ill of her. Maybe it's my fault she became what she is. She wasn't always like that. I tormented her. Took her in when she was utterly poor, not even a change of linen, nothing, absolutely nothing. And I was wealthy, well, comfortable, not rich, of course, but I had money then. And you know, sir, maybe she was right, I was frugal. But that was before the misfortune, and I curse myself for it. My father was frugal, and my mother, all of them. Every penny came to me with effort. And she was frivolous, loved beautiful things, and was poor, and I constantly reproached her for it. I shouldn't have done that. I see it now, sir. Because she's proud, very proud. Don't think she's what she pretends to be. It's not true. She tortures herself with it just to torture me, and because she's ashamed. Maybe she really did become a bad woman, but I don't believe it. Because, sir, she was good. Very good. He wiped his eyes and paused, trying to steady himself. I glanced at him involuntarily, and suddenly, he no longer seemed ridiculous. Even that peculiar, servile sir, which in Germany is used only by the lower classes, no longer grated on me. His face revealed how much effort each word cost him, and as he staggered forward, heavy-footed, his eyes were fixed on the cobblestones, as though he were trying to read in their uneven surface under the uncertain moonlight the very thing that struggled to escape his constricted throat. "Yes, sir," he said, drawing a deep breath, his voice now low and resonant, as if rising from the depths of his soul. "She was good, kind to me. She was deeply grateful that I saved her from poverty, and I knew she was grateful, but I wanted to hear it, again and again. It gave me joy to hear her thank me, sir, endless joy to imagine I was better than her, though I knew I was worse. I would have given away my entire fortune just to hear it always. But she was proud. And when she realized I expected her gratitude, she stopped saying it. So, only for that reason, sir, I made her ask. I never gave freely. I liked that she had to humble herself for every dress, every ribbon. For 3 years I tormented her more and more. But I did it, sir, because I loved her. I liked that she was proud, and yet in my madness I wanted to break that pride. And when she asked for something, I would get angry. But it was all a performance. For me, it was bliss, the chance to humiliate her, because I didn't understand how deeply I loved her. He fell silent again. He walked on, swaying heavily, as if he'd forgotten I was there. He spoke unconsciously, like a man in a dream, and his voice grew louder. I only understood it, on that cursed day, when I refused her money for her mother, a trivial amount. I had already set it aside, but I wanted her to come again, to ask again. What was I saying? Yes, I understood it when I came home and she was gone. Just a note on the table, keep your damned money. I want nothing more from you. That was all, not another word. Sir, I raved for 3 days and nights. I ordered the woods and river searched, paid the police double, ran to every neighbor, they only laughed and mocked me. No trace. Finally, in a nearby village, someone said they'd seen her on a train with a soldier. She'd gone to Berlin. I went there the same day, abandoned my business, lost thousands, my workers robbed me, my manager too, everything. But I swear to you, sir, I didn't care. I spent a week in Berlin before I found her in that human whirlpool, and I went to her. He paused, breathing heavily. Sir, I swear to you. I didn't reproach her with a single word. I cried, knelt before her, offered her money. My entire fortune, let her do with it what she wished, because by then I knew I couldn't live without her. I loved every strand of her hair, her mouth, her body, everything. And it was me, only me, who had driven her to this. She turned pale as death when I walked in. I had bribed her landlady, a vile, low woman. She was white as chalk. She listened to me. Sir, I think she was almost glad to see me. But when I mentioned money, and I did it only to show her I no longer cared about it, she spat at me. And then, when I still wouldn't leave, she called her lover. They mocked me. But I, sir, kept coming back every day. The tenants told me everything. I learned that scoundrel had left her, that she was in need. So I went to her again, sir. But she attacked me and tore up the money I had secretly placed on the table. And when I came back once more, she was gone. Sir, I did everything to find her again. For a whole year, I swear to you, I didn't live, I only searched, hired agents, until I finally learned she was overseas, in Argentina, in a bad house. He fell silent, gasping for breath. The last words came out as a rasp. Then he spoke again, hoarsely, with difficulty. I was terrified, at first, but then I understood, it was all my fault, mine alone. I knew how she suffered, poor thing, because above all, she is proud. I contacted my solicitor, he wrote to the consulate and sent money unsigned, anonymous, just so she would come back. They wired me that it had worked. I knew which ship she was on, and I went to Amsterdam to meet her. I arrived 3 days early, I was burning with impatience. And then, finally, it came. What happiness it was when the smoke appeared on the horizon. I thought I wouldn't have the strength to wait, it docked so slowly, agonizingly slowly. Then the passengers began descending the gangway, and at last, she. I didn't recognize her at first. She was different, painted, unfamiliar, already the way you saw her. When she noticed me, her face went pale, as if drained of life. 2 sailors caught her, otherwise she would have fallen into the water. As soon as she stepped ashore, I approached. I couldn't speak, my throat clenched. She said nothing either, didn't look at me. The porter went ahead with the luggage, and we walked in silence. Then suddenly she stopped and said, "Sir," how she said it, so painfully, so sorrowfully, "do you still want me to be your wife? Even now?" I took her hand. She flinched, but said nothing. Yet I felt everything was right again. Sir, I was happy. I danced around her like a child. When we entered the room, I fell at her feet, babbled nonsense, probably because she smiled through tears and gently touched me, very timidly, of course, but sir, it was bliss. My heart melted. I ran up and down the stairs, ordered dinner in the hotel restaurant, our wedding dinner. I helped her dress, we went down, ate, drank, laughed. She was cheerful like a child, so warm, so kind. She spoke of our home, of how we would live again, and then, his voice suddenly broke, and he made a sharp gesture, as if to crush something. There was a waiter, a petty, unpleasant man. He thought I was drunk because I laughed, danced, fell off my chair. But I was simply happy, so happy, and when I paid, he shorted me 20 francs. I shouted at him, demanded the rest. He grew flustered and placed a gold coin on the table. And then, she suddenly burst out laughing. I looked at her, and it was a different face. Mocking, cruel. Still so petty. Even on our wedding day, she said coldly, sharply, with pity. I was frightened, cursed my pettiness, tried to laugh again. But her joy vanished. Died. She asked for a separate room. I would have done anything for her. That night I lay alone, thinking what to buy her in the morning, how to shower her with gifts, to show I wasn't stingy, that I'd give her anything. Early in the morning I went and bought her a bracelet. When I returned, the room was empty. Just like the last time. I knew there would be a note on the table. I rushed to it, praying it wasn't true, but the note was there. And I read. He fell silent. I stopped instinctively and looked at him. He lowered his head. Then he whispered hoarsely. I read. "Leave me alone. You disgust me." We had reached the harbor. Into the silence came the heavy breath of the approaching tide. Ships stood there with glowing eyes, like great black beasts, some near, others farther off. Somewhere, a song drifted through the air. Everything was indistinct, yet everything was felt, the heavy sleep and troubled dreams of a seaside city. Beside me, the shadow of my companion flickered at my feet, stretching and shrinking in the dim light of the lanterns. I had no words, neither comfort nor question. But his silence clung to me, pressed down with its weight. Suddenly he grabbed my hand. "But I won't leave without her. I've searched for her for months. She torments me, but I won't give up. I beg you, sir, speak to her. She must be mine, tell her that. She won't listen to me. I can't go on like this. I can't keep watching men go to her, and waiting outside for them to come out, drunk. The whole street knows me now, they laugh at me because I stand and wait. It's driving me mad, and still I come back every evening. Sir, I beg you, speak to her. I don't know you, but do it for the love of God, speak to her." I instinctively jerked away, trying to free my hand. A wave of real fear swept over me. But when he sensed I was pulling back from his grief, he suddenly collapsed to his knees in the middle of the street and clung to my legs. "I beg you, sir. You must speak to her. You must, or something terrible will happen. I've spent all my money searching for her, and I won't leave her here, not alive. I bought a knife. I have a knife, sir. I can't bear this. Talk to her. I beg you." He writhed in desperation at my feet. At the far end of the street, 2 policemen appeared. I forced myself to lift him, made him stand. For a moment he stared at me, dazed, then suddenly spoke in a dry, mechanical voice, as if reciting orders. "Turn left down this street. Your hotel is there." He looked at me once more, his pupils seemed to melt into a terrifying, milky void. Then he vanished. I pulled my coat tighter around me. I was shivering. All I felt was exhaustion, thick, black, like a narcotic, as if I were sleepwalking. I tried to gather my thoughts, to make sense of it all, but each time a wave of fatigue swept me away. I reached the hotel, collapsed onto the bed, and slept dumbly, like an animal. By morning, I could no longer tell what had been dream and what reality. And, as if in self-defense, I resisted the urge to sort it out. I woke late, a stranger in a strange city, and went to visit the church I'd been told about, famous for its ancient mosaics. But my eyes refused to absorb what they saw. The memory of the night before grew sharper and more insistent, and I felt an irresistible pull toward that alley, that house. But such streets live only at night. By day they wear gray, cold masks, recognizable only to the initiated. I couldn't find the alley. Tired and frustrated, I returned to the hotel, haunted by visions, half delirium, half reality. My train was scheduled to leave at 9 that evening. I left the city with regret. The porter hoisted my luggage onto his shoulder and walked ahead toward the station. Then, at a certain intersection, something pricked at me. I stopped abruptly. I recognized the cross street that led to that house. I told the porter to wait. He didn't understand at first, then smirked with insolent familiarity, and I went to take one last look at the scene. It was dark, just as it had been the night before. In the dim moonlight, the glass-paneled door of the house glinted faintly. I started to approach, but something stirred in the shadows. With a jolt of fear, I recognized him, the man from yesterday. He was sitting on the doorstep, beckoning to me with frantic gestures. Panic gripped me. I turned and hurried away, seized by a cowardly dread, afraid of getting involved in something, of missing my train. But as I reached the intersection, just before turning the corner, I glanced back one last time. And I saw the man leap to his feet, rush to the door, and fling it open. Something gleamed in his hand. I couldn't tell from a distance whether it was gold or the blade of a knife. It flashed treacherously in the moonlight.